Good evening, Yoga Kids family. Welcome to the December Master Mentor Hangout. Thank you all for coming by and joining us this evening. I want to hear from you. The chat is open. Just want to make sure that everybody can hear me, see me, make sure there's no internet problems. Let me know where you're calling, where you're coming in from this evening. And thank you again for taking some time out of your holiday weekend and family time to come spend it with your Yoga Kids family here live. So we have a great topic here tonight that I think is really very topical in today's society, with so much emphasis on schools and testing and the importance of continuing education, helping students be able to prepare and take a standardized test is really critical and really important. And we're going to have a great discussion around that today and how you can help introduce mindfulness and test prep into your business. So we want to thank you all for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Alicia, who will introduce tonight's Master Mentor.
Yeah, hello everyone and welcome. Good to see you or hear you or see you on the chat this holiday season. Yeah, today with us is Gail Grossman. She's calling in from New York. And Gail has been, I hope it's, well actually I guess it's pretty warm up there right now instead of the typical chilly weather that would be of this time of year. And if you saw Gail's little bio, Gail's been a Yoga Kids teacher since 2000 and one of our amazing trainers. She's opened up a studio in 2004. So she has a lot of experience with working with adults and children, and she recently published a book, Restorative Yoga for Life, and if you haven't seen it or read it, you should definitely get it. It's a great resource for restorative yoga. And today Gail is going to share with us some of the techniques to help students prepare for taking tests and how she introduces that to the classroom and helps work with teachers to help keep that going after she leaves the classroom. So thank you, Gail, for joining us.
Hi, everybody. I'm really happy to be here and excited to be able to share a topic that I think is just so important. You know, I started going into the classrooms even before tools for schools really took off, because I kept trying to get into schools to do the trainings with teachers, and that wasn't being as well received as, of course, me going in and just teaching, because the teachers, the schools didn't have the funds or whatever it may be. So when my kids were younger, I started going in and volunteering before they had to take tests. And that's really how the whole thing evolved. And, you know, the kids were, you know, would beg, like, can't you come back before we have every test, you know? And so I started basically creating a program that I could leave with the teachers with that information of the things that I did do with the kids, so that they could then follow up and hopefully have the kids do those things before they took their tests. So that's sort of how it all got started, and I had the wonderful fortune last year of being given a grant to go into one of the schools in my district, working with 3rd and 4th graders who, of course, are all taking these major standardized tests, and some for the first time. So needless to say, you know, they really need it. And the benefit of that particular program was that I was able to create a habit for these kids. I went in on a weekly basis and I gave them a lot of tools. So they eventually got to figure out what stuff they really resonated with. And I was excited that I could get their feedback of the things that they felt worked for them, rather than my just saying, oh, this is what we're going to do today, and hope that when they actually needed that information, they would be able to pull it up from their little brains. So, so that was another way to approach it. I've also gone into schools and done like a one-off, you know, where I worked with older children, like in the middle school level, and I try to leave them with something so that they, you know, are able to remember. So I do like a little bookmark, which I'll show you guys here. It's just like a tiny little these are the things that you can do for yourself. And I'll go over some of those things with you guys so you have an idea of what that's all about. But I would love to know just from you guys, just, if you could maybe respond, we could do a little quiz. How many of you are going into schools currently? And I guess, the other thing is how many of you are doing like a test prep, or is it more straight kids yoga with those kids? So would be helpful to know. Could we figure that out, Sam?
Yeah,
Okay.
and there's a little bit of a delay, so if everybody wants to just put that into the chat, let us kind of know, are you engaged in schools? Are you working with children in that capacity? And how is it working out for you? And just put that in the chat, and then we'll kind of see where everybody's at.
Right. I guess while people are responding, I'll use the time to keep talking, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, good. So, so obviously, one of the important things is to be able to have teachers be able to utilize it with the kids. And so my main thing is leaving them with a leave behind. So I have a leave behind that I create for school teachers to kind of remind them of what I did with the kids. So, for example, there are times where the kids really need calming, but there are other times where they need to be a little bit more energized, and they're having trouble focusing. So I do different things for those different things. As we all know, there's energizing postures and breathing techniques, and then there's stuff that really calm them down. And so, for example, for calming, I have the kids do neck rolls. I explain to them how important it is to do those neck stretches, and how our neck can get really tight like a vice, and that when it's really tight and the muscles are tight, how we can't get blood to our brain. And so I really talk about the importance of getting that little stretch to get the blood to your brain so you can think better. We do twisting, like the 360-degree owl, and I bring in the tools for schools cards, because I think that it's really important to be able to show the picture. So, for example, even like twist and blow. If we're showing a twist, I want the kids to see the pictures, but I also want to really try to sell it to the teachers so that they, go and buy the cards, because they really can give the kids some of the really important information. Let's see, what else do? We do the Take 5 breathing for calming, and also in terms of focusing, getting them to do the eyes around the clock. It's always interesting, the kids' feedback on that. Some of them say, oh, my eyes hurt so much from that. But after a while, they really start to love doing that. We do ragdoll and the peace breath. Those are all calming poses, and breathing. And in terms of, energizing, I really, the teachers know when the kids really need the more energizing postures. And, I do like the reach for the sun, and the bunny breath, and we do the meow moo, seated, because of course, we know in a classroom the space is limited. I always like to do some kind of, brain balance, so eagle is really good. And we do the Tarzan thymus tap as well. If we're doing test prep as a class, like where the teacher is leading it, then I'll do things that do require the kids to make some noise. We'll do some volcano, we'll do R's for roar, or things like that, just to get the stressful feeling out. And I really try to teach the teachers the importance of the kids being able to express that feeling and get it out. But I also want to leave the kids with the ability to do certain things that they can just be sitting at a desk before they're taking a test, especially those standardized tests. The last thing they want are kids to be, roaring and doing volcano pose. But I think that that's really important, to be able to give them some tools that they can, do quietly as well. So yes,
And
that's
what kind
really
of
important.
results, Gail, what have you seen that kind of comes out of this? I mean, are you able to track that
Oh,
in any way to see?
I wish. Don was just saying that he'd love to, have people would like to know about how I got a grant and stuff. I was really fortunate because I spent a lot of time trying to get into the schools, and unless you're volunteering, most of the time it's really, I find it challenging, just school budgets and stuff like that. But we have a wonderful education foundation in our town that started several years ago, and a principal from one of the elementary schools actually put the grant together to this education foundation to bring yoga into the classroom, and specifically to help children before the whole testing preparation, before they take tests. So it was right up my alley because I'd been going into schools and doing that, already, and so it was just a natural thing to be able to do that. But I wish that I had some kind of metric. Unfortunately, I just get wonderful feedback from the teachers, and I get lovely little notes from the kids saying thank you so much, and so sometimes that's all you need. And the school is definitely happy. Unfortunately, you can't do the same grant year after year. They're looking to bring in different things. So otherwise, and we tried to sort of title it, but we couldn't get it into the school this year. So they try to mix it up.
That's great. I have a question for you, Gail. Are these mostly just for standardized testing that they were focusing on, or was it just for your regular math test or spelling test, or was it more for the bigger standardized tests where they have hours of test taking?
Right. Well, the benefit of doing the long-term program that I did was that they were able to incorporate it for the whole year. And then when it got closer to the standardized tests, I really, went through it with them in full detail, all of the, specific things that they definitely should try to remember to do before they take the test. That test in particular, because really in a traditional classroom setting, if they're just taking a spelling test or a math test or whatever, the teacher can say, okay, everybody, let's take a couple of deep breaths in and a couple of deep, or whatever the teacher feels the kids would benefit from at that moment, to just get a little bit more comfortable. But they're not really proctoring the standardized test the same way. There's somebody that comes in. It's not necessarily the classroom teacher when they're taking these standardized tests. So, and especially like in a middle school, high school scenario, they're definitely not. But that being said, Yoga Kids definitely is more geared towards the younger kids. So that's what that's really the majority of the students that I end up working with anyway.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I had this little bookmark, and I try to give it to all the kids. So it's just like a tiny little bookmark. And so I tell them, do the take 5 breath, neck stretches, shoulder stretches, where we shrug the shoulders up, we breathe in, and we, drop the shoulders down. So they do that a couple of times, they know that. And then we do the switch breath, where we're, holding one nostril, the alternate nostril breathing, and eyes around the clock. I find that those really set the kids up. So I tell them, it doesn't have to be a lot of things, as long as you remember to do those few things, and you're going to, feel much better before you take the test. So, yeah. And of course we know how important the whole brain balance aspect is, and so anytime that they can do anything like that, even just to stretch their shoulders, where they're doing eagle and wrapping their arms is a crossing a midline practice. So they all know, oh, I feel really tense here. We talk about it. I think one of the biggest things is I always try to ask the kids, how do you feel before you take a test? So I get them really thinking about, well, what are the emotions? What are the feelings? What does it feel like in your body? Do you feel it in your stomach? Do you feel it in your shoulders? Where does it show up for you? And so typically, if the kids can give me a little bit of a response before I work with them, then I'm able to really gear what I teach them towards what they resonate with, instead of just being up there and like a regular classroom scenario where they're just being taught. I want their feedback, yoga kids way. So yeah,
That's great.
yeah. Yeah, so, but yeah, I think that, obviously if you can create a routine and that you can leave the teachers with a routine, that's really the most beneficial. But obviously if you can only get the opportunity to go in one time, then I try to leave something behind. So yeah, I think that's really important. So, Sam, did we get any response on I know Kathy works in schools. Alicia, you work in school a little bit. You like to. That's cool.
Yeah.
But,
One of the things, in part of your leave behind strategy, is there any sort of communication back to the parents to let them know what the kids are learning and kind of the benefits of it and how it may help them perform better?
oh yes, definitely. Actually, because I got my certification with Yoga Kids back in 2000, and right in like 2001, I think it was, or 2002, I can't remember. I went back to Indiana when they came out with Tools for Schools. So the Tools for Schools program at the time really had a lot of information with different lesson plans and things like that. And there used to be a thing called OM pages. And so that really reminded me of how important that home communication was. So every week after I left the kids' classroom, I sent an email to the teacher, which I pre-formatted with all of the things that I did with the kids, so that the parents were informed. And actually, a lot of the parents are yoga students of mine at my yoga studio. So a lot of them would come up to me and tell me they're doing those poses with their child, or their child has come home and is teaching them, or so I know at least it's being reinforced in the home environment as well, which is really great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is good. I was going to share, I know in my mention in the chat that I like to introduce the techniques to the children during the after-school classes. It's very hard to get into the classroom. Like you said, you got into the grant. So during those after-school classes is when I teach the kids how to help themselves, to prepare themselves for tests. Not the whole class is doing it, but techniques that they can use, and some of the techniques like you just mentioned. It'd be great for the teachers to do that. But even with my own kids, I, talk to them like, if you're standing up on one leg, if you go into the restroom, just stand on one foot, get a little balancing in there, like you said, crossing the arms. And I even teach them, like, bend over and pretend like you're tying your shoe to get, blood to the brain, and do a little baby inversion. I'm like, you don't have to stand out like you're doing yoga. You can do it inconspicuously, and really just trying to reach each child. If you can't get into a classroom, just try to teach the kids that you teach these little techniques. And so, as those kids are doing little things and they share it with their friends and, spread the word, if you can't actually get into a classroom to have a teacher introduce these, we can still do it in our Yoga Kids classes, so the kids can still take those techniques into the classroom with them.
Most definitely. Yeah, I mean, and that's something that I definitely have incorporated over the years with all the kids classes that I teach. I have found that when the kids are in a school environment, that's the best way to really understand what they're dealing with, because of course after school they just want to have fun. They're not really thinking like, oh, I got to take a test, or I got to do that. I mean, it doesn't mean you can't discuss those things and talk about how they can use those things. But yeah, it's definitely in the classroom environment, I have found that to work really well. One of the other things I wanted to say is, like, if I have a longer period of time with kids, I do try to teach them a little meditation. different ways to, just simply close their eyes, focus on their breath, moving in and out. Sometimes I'll do spinning inward with them, just a short one, just to get them to, really connect to, just going inside and getting quieter. Or I'll do like a short yoga nidra where they're, just getting more relaxed, because I think that's the biggest challenge is in many ways it's just, they know the information, but when they get stressed out about, what's going on, that's when they forget it, or they're just nervous about the fact that they're going to forget it. But when you get them relaxed, then they realize they actually know it. So
yeah. That actually reminds me of a story. When I was up at the National Kids Yoga Conference last month, there were some teens present who actually did a panel and were doing a discussion. This one young boy mentioned that exact same thing, that he went to go take a test, and that, test anxiety is a real thing. They get stressed out, and he looked at the test and he was blank. He had no idea what the answers were, but he remembered his yoga, because they were doing yoga in the schools where his school was, inner city New York, actually. And he remembered the yoga, he stopped, he breathed, he calmed himself down, and when he looked back at the test, he all of a sudden knew all the answers. So all the answers were there, he studied, he knew the answers, but when he went to go take the test, he blanked, and his stress level was so high, he just couldn't remember the answers. So just what you were saying, that's amazing to give these kids those kind of tools.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Don was just asking if the 3rd and 4th grade kids feel comfortable getting quiet and meditating in the classroom. Yes, definitely. And the cool part is, I've been also really fortunate because a lot of these kids have actually taken yoga at my yoga studio. So many of them by 3rd and 4th grade have done yoga before. Whereas many years ago, like when my son was in 3rd grade or 4th grade, the kids hadn't really been doing yoga anywhere else except if someone came in on a special occasion. So it is something they have been introduced to, and it's not so strange. It's not so odd. Many more parents are doing yoga, and so I think the kids are a lot more receptive to it, and they just love it, and they love having the tools. They really love having the tools to be able to help themselves. I know for myself, I started meditating at 10, and I was given a mantra and that whole thing through transcendental meditation. But I just love to be able to give kids a lot of different meditation tools. One where they can focus on the breath, or one where they can count, or they can visualize something. Whatever you can give them. Different people, as we know, learn differently, connect to things differently. And so when we can really give them, as much as possible, then they're just so much happier. They really, they just want to know that there's something that can help them when they feel the way they feel. And I also think that, Yoga Kids is so great because there's the nature of it being more inquisitive with the children. We really have the ability to really figure out what direction we have to go to as facilitators. And so when you know that, then the kids really resonate with it. And I was really lucky being able to go in regularly, because I was able to see the things that they asked for week after week after week. Are we going to do that? Are we going to do that? So I knew the ones that they were really getting and the ones that they really loved to do. And so that of course I repeated. I always tried to repeat certain things so that it became, second nature for them. They weren't uncomfortable at all. So
that's good. I'm sure they loved it. I have a question for you. As being able to work with those students, did you find that the teachers that were in that school wanted to also learn? Did you work with other teachers of other grades to help them with test prep, or were only the 3rd and 4th graders able to benefit from?
what you were doing?
In that particular grant, we actually had other grades that got to do yoga as well. I was in the 3rd and 4th grade, and another yoga teacher, actually somebody who I mentored through Yoga Kids, was able to go into the other grades. But they didn't all, not every teacher was receptive to it. So, but I did the entire 3rd grade and the entire 4th grade. And so, so in the other grades, it was sort of they picked and chose which classrooms were actually going to get it.
Do you know if anyone kept doing it after you left? The teachers?
Oh no, they definitely, yeah. And I know that like certain teachers do yoga themselves. So of course the teachers that do yoga themselves then felt like they were left with some tools to be able to continue with what we had done. Other teachers who didn't do yoga, they loved the idea of it, but they were a little more reticent about it. And of course, I'm trying to get them all to do the Yoga Kids Foundations training, or at least the Taste of Yoga Kids, something. So we'll see how that goes. But they always say they want to do it, and they never sign up for it. So. But, yeah.
Did you guys have any experience working with children with special needs, and what did you kind of get out of that, if you did have that experience?
I actually, I did go into a private school. There's a school in particular that's really well known in Queens, and they had, the parents actually raised money to bring me in to teach the teachers. And then the principal had me come back to the school to make sure that the teachers were in fact utilizing what I had taught them. And then they had me come back another time just to work with the kids directly. But this was a special needs school. I worked with both the upper school and the lower school, so all different ages. And that was one of the schools where I left the card behind with the reminders of what the teachers should be doing with the kids, and hopefully they continued to try to follow with what I did with the kids each time. So yeah. I know Karen's asking what tools I find work best for self-assessment. It's really, as I said, and you may have missed this part, I do ask the kids to kind of tell me where do they feel stress, when they're taking a test, and many kids don't even understand the word stress. I think it really depends. Really depends on the age and all that. But I have found that they are pretty good at expressing, and I ask specifically, like, when you take a test, what do you feel? How, do you feel it in a part of your body? That sort of thing. And many of the kids are really good about expressing what they feel. So, let's see, what else can I tell you? Yeah, I mean, I definitely bring, if you're going into any kind of classroom setting, or even, in your own classes, and you're trying to give the kids some test prep, I highly recommend using the Tools for Schools cards. I think that they're really, geared well towards the classroom environment, of course, because we have limited space. So it shows them a picture. You can do it in your chair, and you can twist, and you can do those things. You don't need to have a yoga mat. You don't need to have the space to spread out, and you can even do certain things quietly.
Yeah. How long do you typically spend on the test prep before they go into a test?
Well, when I'm going into a classroom, I'll probably do more than just the test prep. So then I kind of will go back over certain things. So I don't really expect them to do more than 5 minutes of a test prep. I think, if you think about it, you're given the test maybe you're waiting for the test to be handed out. We talk about when is a good time to do that, doing your little tools that you've been given, or is it like in the beginning of the test? Yes, there's definitely certain things that we want to do before we actually start taking the test. Then while you're taking the test, maybe you're really tired, so you're trying to focus yourself again. So we'll talk about, what breathing techniques or postures you could do, like a seventh inning stretch kind of a scenario. So I don't expect them to be like a long routine. Again, it's just something that throughout the time that I'm working with them, they learn them, and then we go back over what those ones are so that they can go back and utilize them when they need them.
Okay, so they really then are on their own for the most part when they're doing a standardized test to kind of keep themselves set up in the beginning and throughout to the duration to kind of keep their energy and keep their focus all the way through the end of their standardized test. Wow.
Exactly. And so, of course, if I can get the teachers to do stuff and they're willing to do it, then it's a plus. But otherwise, for the most part, it's going to be self-directed. But the kids are old enough by the time, they're taking standardized tests, they're already in 3rd and 4th grade. So they pretty much, they know that they kind of know the drill, so to speak. So they know when they can kind of sneak in, doing a take 5 breath, closing their eyes, or doing some neck stretches, or a little twist, or whatever they need to, or maybe they've got to energize themselves. So they have to figure out, okay, what do I usually do to energize myself? So hopefully we've done it enough times, or the little take home that I give them will help them to remember it, and their parents will help them to remember it as well. If you've got the parents on your side, that's half the battle. If they, it's kind of like, having help at home makes a big difference if they practice it with them.
Do you give them a little formula or anything to work with, or is it just that little handout card that they go back to?
No, I don't give them a formula. I just have the little cards, and we talk about, what part of your body might be tight. So, if the kids are telling me, well, I feel a lot of tension in my neck and my shoulders, then I really stress to them, well, we want to do the shoulder rolls and the neck rolls and that sort of thing. But if they say they just feel anxiety, then I really want to give them, breathing techniques, calming, the peace breath, or take 5 breath, or, simply, things like that. So I try to just, reiterate what those things are. Don was asking about the parents. I mean, I do think the kids share it. I had mentioned this before, that the parents are aware, because I send home an email, and I do see a lot of these parents actually in my adult classes, and they always tell me that the kids are loving it, and they're definitely sharing it with their family. Not even a question. So it's always great.
So I just wanted to go back one more time for the information that you're sharing with the kids. So we have find out when your anxiety is and kind of stretch that area out. Use your breathing to help relax you and calm you. I know you mentioned crossing the midline of the body for some brain balancing. Are there any other major pose categories that you teach them, either balancing or inverting, or I know you mentioned twisting as well? Are there any other things like that you make sure that you teach the kids?
Well, I mean, I would say that because I'm aware that if it's prior to them taking a test, I don't want it to be disruptive. So obviously in a classroom setting, if it's something that's not like a standardized test and the teacher is willing to do it, then obviously we can get up, we can stand, we can do other poses that can be done standing. But really when we're just trying to be in under the radar and just oh, I'm about to take a test. Okay, what are the things that I can do right now to calm myself, focus myself, that sort of thing, then it's really seated, quiet, relaxing
Inconspicuous
thing.
yoga.
As inconspicuous as you can. I mean, I teach them about how to, pat themselves on the back and do, cow face and stuff like that. But and that's like easy enough that nobody's going to give them a hard time and say, oh, Johnny, stop moving around. That they should pretty much understand that the kids are stretching so that they don't feel so much tension in their shoulders. But for the most part, we try to do really, simple, quiet, in your seat kind of stuff. So,
Great.
Yeah, that's the most important. For sure. Yeah. And as I said, like if I have an opportunity to go in on a regular basis, I think that's the most important thing. But unfortunately, you don't always have the benefit of that. But if you can create a routine, then it becomes like second nature for them, and they know, okay, this is what I got to do, and this is just how we roll. This before I take a test, I do neck stretches, I do eyes around the clock, or I do a couple of peace breaths so I feel calmer. That's the most important thing, that we really give them the opportunity to feel it, like that's just what they do. They don't even have to think about it. It's like sharpening your pencil.
Right.
I do that too. Yeah.
That's great. I know one of Yoga Kids, one of our main missions and our goals is to empower children, and what you're mentioning is exactly that. It's empowering the kids to take control of their test taking and their own anxieties or their own emotions or their own engine speeds. So that's wonderful. I know as teachers we get in there and we can lead a class, but to be able to have them be able to regulate and assess, like Karen was asking, to be able to assess themselves what they need in that moment is a bigger lesson than just a pose.
Yeah, well, I talk about it, that's why I love the Tools for Schools has that name, the whole idea of having a toolbox. Okay, like if I have to hang a picture, I need a hammer, and that's the tool that I'm going to use. Well, if I'm feeling anxiety, then I know I need to do a calming breath. If I'm feeling really, low energy, I know I have to do an energizing breath. So it's those kind of things, and that's what we're really empowering them to do, is to really know what the difference is. How does it feel when I feel this way? What are the signs that I feel in my body when I feel a certain way? And okay, what tool do I need now so that I can handle this situation?
Yeah. Do you have an assessment of about how many times it takes working with these kids that they then feel confident to use these tools on their own?
No, I mean, I've had different scenarios, right? So I've gone in one time, I've gone in 3 times, and then there's, the grant that I had where I was able to go in for several months every week. So, obviously those kids were definitely the most comfortable, and by the time they got to their testing, it was really second nature. And unfortunately, the other classrooms where I, didn't get to go in quite as often, I didn't, except for getting a letter from the kids saying, thank you so much, can you come every time I have to take a test? That's the only other feedback I really get. So, yeah,
that would be great to be able to get some more qualitative analysis on how, results for them.
Yeah, I'd love to see, that's something I'd have to really follow up with the principal from the school. I'm not even sure if they've gotten the results of last year's standardized tests. I don't know how long that takes. Even
being able to go in and ask the kids again, do you remember what we did, and how would you do that? Do you remember what we talked about? Because it'd be great to be able to go to a school and say, it takes 4 sessions, to be able to come in until the kids kind of get a handle on it. Like one's not enough. I can introduce it, but they need more. It'd be great to have a handle on.
Right. I mean, I would say if you can go in 3 times, I definitely noticed that when I went in on a regular basis, I would say by the 3rd time, kids were asking for specific poses by name. They knew the names. They knew which ones they really liked to do. They knew which ones they didn't like to do, for that matter. So you know, and of course those are the kids that are willing to express themselves a little bit more. Of course, you got the quiet kids too, which, you know, may not express themselves as well, but they're quietly using those all those techniques without telling you that they are.
Right. That's great
So,
information.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I'm just trying to think if there was anything else I have to share.
Yeah, if anybody else has
Mhm,
any questions, type it in the chat
mhm.
box, or um, I was going to say let us know. I don't know how else we would know. Type it in the chat box so that we can address them and Gail can address them. She's got obviously lots of experience in this field. Um, I guess
Oh,
Karen.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that idea, Karen. Um, Definitely. I love that to do a common visualization. You know, like that sort of thing I find is great when they're studying at home and stuff like that. Unfortunately, they don't have the benefit of bringing that in before they have to go take a test. So you know, I try to just give them the ones that they can remember and do on their own, that don't require any kind of pre-recorded information. But I love it. It's I used to do that actually myself as a kid. I used to record meditations of my voice. So.
Yeah, I know. Again, it doesn't really work with the test prep, but I was working with a student recently, and she was saying she gets anxiety. She has to take medication
Mm,
because of her anxiety, and I'm like, honey, we need to work on this, on yoga, so
hmm.
you can, find some ways to relax on your own. And I was introducing, like you said, the different way children learn, that the different ways they relax is very different. And I said, you need to tap into your senses and find out which sensory input relaxes you the most. Is it seeing something? Is it smelling something? Is it hearing something? And being able to have them educate themselves on, if they're tactile, do they need to hold something soft? What's going to calm them down? And,
Hmm.
again, they can't really use that in a test, but in prepping for a test, that might be something they could do right before a test. If there's a certain smell that calms them, or a sound, or a
Hmm.
memory, or a thought, even a picture they can keep in their pocket of somebody that they love, depending on which sensory gives them the most relaxation and reduces anxiety. So I was just recently working with a little girl, well, a teenager actually, but
Hmm.
just trying to give them more tools. They just don't know how to handle all these stressors.
Hmm. Most definitely.
Yeah, thank
And
you,
that
Karen.
that's part of growing up too. Is like, you know, they have to learn what they need to do for themselves and what works and what doesn't work, and knowing that sometimes, you know, we don't know what we're supposed to do, and then we can ask for help, or we can, you know, trial and error, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much for all of the wonderful
Uh,
information. Is there any last words or anything else you can think of that you didn't cover? You had some great advice, great information on your experience so far, and I think that gives us a lot to think about on what we can do.
yeah. Um, I can't really think of anything else.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Gail, so much, and thank you to
Yes,
all
my
the
pleasure.
YKs and our CYKTs who
Hmm.
are taking time out of their holiday to join us on our call. Don't forget, all of these calls are recorded and archived on the Yoga Kids website under the digital library. And you guys are all in luck because next month we have our very special guest, Sam Watkins. He's going to be introducing our next Hangout on Sunday, January 24th. So please mark your calendars. And he's going to be introducing the more business side of Yoga Kids, or of your own kids yoga business. So Sam, you want to tell us a little bit more about what that presentation is going to be?
Yeah, one of the most powerful tools that I think you all have access to promote your business is Facebook. And so next month in the Master Mentor Hangout, I'm going to be talking about and showing you some strategies for local marketing in your neighborhood and in your radius on Facebook to get some awareness in your community about your services, and get some excitement around classes or events that you may be doing. And we'll go through some live demonstrations and give you some practical ways to market online locally using Facebook.
Hmm.
So that will be up, ready to go in the end of end of January for that Master Mentor, and we'll let you guys know when you can sign up and get reserved for that. But big thanks to Gail for such a great evening, and thank you guys all for coming out and hanging out with your Yoga Kids family here at the end of the December. Have a wonderful New Year's, and we will see you in January.
See you in 2016.
Okay.
2016.
Wow.
Thanks, guys.
Good night. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye. Bye.